I am the Kaiju no Kami, and tonight we are going to be reviewing King Kong vs. Godzilla. King Kong was originally created and released in 1933 by RKO Pictures. By 1960, RKO was no longer a production company, and Willis O'Brien and John Beck took the idea of doing a King Kong movie to Universal so they could pit him against Frankenstein's monster. Their attempt to get a new King Kong movie jump-started caught the attention of Toho, who always wanted to make a movie featuring the monster. As such, the idea to have Kong go up against Frankenstein's monster was scrapped and replaced with Godzilla. Speaking of Toho, after Godzilla raids again, they started to move away from Godzilla and work on movies that featured other monsters. Toho's biggest hit since Godzilla came in the form of a giant moth monster called Mothra in 1961. Wait. Am I in color now?
Yes!
Oh. Okay. Cool. In keeping with the American production, Ishiro Honda wanted to keep the gigantic gorilla in stop motion while Godzilla was kept in a suit. Unfortunately, production costs and time kept this from being possible, so they decided to just make King Kong into a rubber suit. In the meantime, John Beck was given all rights to control the movie in non-Asian territories, which he then sold to Universal, and hence the different versions between the US and Japan. Depending on the version of the movie you watch, there will be a different beginning. In the English version, the movie begins by introducing us to a newscaster by the name of Eric Carter. Carter's job is to exposit to the viewer all of the events that are transpiring throughout the movie as if we were watching the movie as a news broadcast. Also, the satellite that Carter uses to talk to other people around the world is actually a ship from the Mysterian. Carter informs us that there have been a series of earthquakes throughout Chile and that large icebergs have been floating around the waters by Japan. He also lets us know that there were berries found on an island discovered by a Japanese professor. The movie then introduces us to our leads, all who work for a company called Pacific Pharmaceuticals, and they have a TV show with poor rating. The boss of the advertising department, Tako, is played by Ichiro Arashima, while his two associates are Osamu Sakurai and Kinsaburo Furi, both played by Tadao Takashima and Yu Fujiki. Takao assigns the duo to venture to this Faroe Island in order to find the giant monster and make him the company's advertising campaign. Now in the Japanese version, the movie starts off with us seeing the TV show Pacific Pharmaceuticals airs, and we learn that the show is only acquiring 5% in ratings. Sakurai is actually a drummer for the TV program, and Furu informs him that a meeting has been requested between them with Tako, and that is the meeting we were first introduced to these characters in the English version. Afterwards, Sakurai goes to his sister's place and we meet both his sister Fumiko, played by Miyahama, and her boyfriend Kazuo Fujita, played by Rodan's Kenji Sahara. This will not be the last time we see Sahara in a Godzilla movie, as he will return for several more. Fujita reveals to Sakurai his newest invention, the world's strongest, thinnest wire. A naval submarine that was investigating the icebergs in Japan come across one that is lighting up and it is destroyed by Godzilla, and we see him break out of his icy prison from the last movie. Now, in the Japanese version, we actually see more of Sakurai and Furu's arrival on the Faroe Island before we actually see Godzilla break free from the ice. The army is sent out to stop Godzilla, and just listen to the differences between the two versions. I definitely feel this scene is a lot more energetic with a Fukabe score rather than the one we got in English with no music. It just feels like it belongs in a Godzilla movie where this one does not. Now, one thing you may notice is the Godzilla suit looks to be quite different from the previous two. Gone are the ears, fangs, and the fourth toe. Instead here we get a more reptilian looking design, and I kind of like it. It isn't anywhere near my favorite suit, and something looks off about the way he moves his arms, as they do look like rubber, but it works. Another thing to note is that in the English version, the Prime Minister is constantly asked if he's going to use an atom bomb to stop Godzilla, which is weird given Japan's history. It is never mentioned in the Japanese version, which makes a lot more sense. In the Japanese version, we see a scene of Tako upset with all the news of Godzilla, as he feels it is going to take away from his spotlight. He sits down and... What the heck was that? Let's watch that again. This moment is even funnier in the English version because this is the first scene we see of Tako after a news report is shown. Sakura and Furu arrive on the island, or in the case of the Japanese version, they arrive there before Godzilla woke up, and they meet the natives and offer some gifts to them. Whoa. I don't know how to respond to that. They are allowed to stay when lightning strikes, and all the natives start praying and chanting to their beast god. Sakura and Furu believe it is just the sound of thunder they are praying to when they suddenly hear loud roars coming from the island. In the English version, Fumiko is informed that a plane Fujita was on crashed in Hokkaido. While the scene is found much later in the Japanese version, it is the ship Fujita was on that went missing, possibly searching for Godzilla.
It's in the papers. Flight 311X to Hokkaido crashes.
Hold on, how do they just pronounce Hokkaido?
Tragedy struck Hokkaido Airport today.
Why don't you go to Hokkaido?
Hokkaido? What? Another news report informs us that Godzilla was frozen in ice for thousands of years, and Dr. Johnson says that he found fossils of the monster in Japan. Did the writers of this version not watch the previous movie? Sakura and Furu explore the island, and again, depending on the version you watch, the conversation between the two will differ. In English, Furu is complaining that his corns are in pain because of a giant monster, while in the Japanese version they are discussing Godzilla. Nevertheless, they hear some roars and start running back to the village in fear. That night, a giant octopus makes its way into the village, desiring the berry juice.
Let loose the kraken!
I do like the superimposing that was done here, as it is really well executed. At least until everyone starts throwing their spears and torches at the monster, as you can clearly see the shadows from them on the screen the octopus is being projected on. King Kong breaks through the gates, holding him back. Those gates didn't seem all that strong. What if happened if King Kong had ever come at another time? After Kong has defeated the octopus, he starts to drink the red berry juice and... Jesus, dude! What is up with your face? Seriously, that face is just yuck. The natives start chanting to get him to fall asleep. Sakura decides it is time to go home and take Kong with them. Once again, in the Japanese version, we have a scene of Tako celebrating their acquisition of Kong, and they decide that they are going to pit him up against Godzilla.
King Kong対Godzilla.
In the English version, a news report is brought up, and Johnson tells us the brain sizes between Godzilla and King Kong, and that the two monsters are natural enemies, so they will automatically destroy each other. Right. Tako arrives on the ship and... Seriously, that is hilarious. The ship is halted by the Navy, and in the English version, Tako is told that he is not allowed to bring Kong into Japan, while in the Japanese version he is told that any damages Kong does to Japan is his responsibility. Fujita returns home. Again, depending on the version, he had either missed his flight or left the ship before it disappeared, only to find out that Fumiko has taken a train to Hokkaido in hopes that he might be alive. And of course, that is the very train Godzilla is about to land near. After a grueling search, Fujita manages to rescue Fumiko from Godzilla's reign of destruction. In the meantime, King Kong wakes up and is released. Oh, that's where I've heard that music from. Look at Tako's face there. That man is just awesome. King Kong and Godzilla meet for the first time, and when did Kong's arms get so long? After throwing some stones at Godzilla and a few fire breath attacks later, King Kong flees the battle and Godzilla continues his rampage. An attempt is made to trap Godzilla, and here we learn from Carter and friends that Godzilla avoids electricity and the high tension wires while King Kong draws his strength from it. Once again, I do not think these people have watched the original movie. King Kong attacks Tokyo and breaks through the blockade. During their escape, Fujita and Fumiko are separated and Kong attacks the train.
Subway, eat fresh.
And Fumiko is kidnapped. Why her? In the original King Kong movie, he was attracted to Anne because she was a blonde, whereas none of the natives on Skull Island were. Here, nobody has blonde hair, making it impossible for Kong to see any differences between Fumiko and another woman on the train. And because it was in the original movie, King Kong climbs up the diet building. Sakurai tells the military he has an idea on how to save both Princess Peach and get Donkey Kong to battle Bowser. The military shoots missiles into the atmosphere around Kong that contain the berry juice from the island, and Sakurai uses his drums and a tape he recorded on the natives' chant in order to help Kong pass out. Fortunately, Kong falls on his bum and Fumiko is saved. Can you imagine what would have happened if Kong had just fallen the wrong way? Oh no, he just crushed Fumiko.
You bastard!
They then tie Kong up to balloons using the wire Fujita invented and move him to Mount Fuji where Godzilla is located. I know this is strong wire, but come on! King Kong is released and...
First you stride, then you glide, then you slide, 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 and get wet. Slip, slip inside.
Kong slides down the mountain, landing on top of Godzilla. They fool around a little bit and King Kong is defeated. Suddenly a storm breaks out and strikes Kong to revive him.
It's alive! Alive!
I've always wanted to say that.
The battle wages on as Kong grabs Godzilla's tail and tries to throw him.
Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
We hear the Creature from the Black Lagoon music throughout the entire fight, while in the Japanese version we are treated to some nice battle music from Ifukube. Kong tries to shove a tree down Godzilla's throat, but Godzilla just blows it up with his breath. After the two destroy another castle, they both fall into the ocean below. A small earthquake rumbles around, at least in the Japanese version. In the English one it is, "My God, people! Do we really need to see all that mindless destruction added on top? It just comes out of nowhere and feels unnecessary." King Kong emerges from the watery depths and heads home while Godzilla is nowhere to be seen. Now, I do want to say that there is no difference between the English ending and the Japanese ending. When I was growing up, people talked about how Godzilla won in the Japanese version while Kong won in the English version. Yes, the newscaster at the end of the movie does say that Kong had won, but in reality, nobody truly won. As you can see here, both endings are the same outside of hearing both monsters roar in the Japanese version as the end flies across the screen. Overall, the movie is a massive improvement over its predecessor, but it is still not without some issues. The biggest distraction from the movie is the King Kong suit. It is just butt-ass ugly. The fur looks more like brown astroturf, and I have no idea what is going on with his face. Add to the fact that the length of his arms keep changing on the fly, and you have a mess of a monster. As I said before, the Godzilla suit has made some drastic changes from the previous entries, but I actually feel that they do work as it does give him a more reptilian look. There's just something about those arms that I do not like. The head is quite nice looking though, with its reptile flake features. The breath could use some work as it looks kind of weak in this movie. I really love the superimposing done, and they did a nice job of tanning the natives. The differences between the Japanese version and the English version are quite noticeable to the point that you do feel like you're watching an entirely different movie. But neither version is terrible by any means. The music Universal used throughout the movie is fine, but the fact that it is just taken from other movies ruins the identity of this being a Godzilla movie. Thankfully, Ifukube's star track of the movie is still intact. Nevertheless, some of the fight scenes with Godzilla feel a lot more energetic with Ifukube's score than they do with Universal's. The biggest detractor for me though are the news reports in the English version. I just don't understand what the point of them was. All they really did was break up the pacing of the movie to tell us about the most obvious things going on. How about just letting us see the movie instead of telling us about it? And then the moments where Dr. Johnson has explained that Godzilla has not seen the Earth for millions of years is just insulting to those who favor continuity, as it feels like Universal was not paying attention to the movies that had already existed. Either that, or Johnson was just living in a giant bubble and didn't know that Japan had been attacked by this monster 2 times before. Thankfully, the story as a whole is still intact, and while I still wouldn't put the characters near the quality of the ones from the original Godzilla, they are likable, especially Taco, who is just awesome all around. He is truly a comic relief character done well. The miniatures of the movie are pretty decent, like you can tell they are definitely toys. Despite its flaws, it is definitely worthwhile watching these two giant monsters battle each other. And some people do hope that it will happen again in the future. And who knows, with WB owning the licenses to both Godzilla and King Kong, this might be something that we may actually see happen. Well, that is all the time I have for in this episode. Stay tuned next time for my next review, Mothra vs. Godzilla. Bye.